Looking at the motherboard is a point of attachment of every hardware component of the computer. Like in our discussion earlier, we talked of the peripheral devices. All the peripheral devices, including the internal components of a computer, are all attached to what you would call the motherboard. Usually the motherboard comes in about 3 colors. We have blue, we have green, then we have brown. That doesn't mean that every motherboard that you see has to be in these 3 colors, but those are just the 3 common or most common colors that you'll find the motherboard in. Then also when you look at the input and output devices, this is a slide that I talked about previously, but I'm just going to make a few remarks before we can proceed to the next slide. Input devices accept data and instructions from the user or from another computer system. Then we also have output devices that returns the processed data, what we call information at this stage. Because if you've been following very well, I remember explaining that at the input stage we are dealing with data or data, depending on how you pronounce it. Then when you come to the output stage, here we are dealing with what you call information. After processing, we are no longer dealing with data, we are dealing with what you call information. So yes, output devices return processed data, which we call information, to the user or to another computer system. Then we also have input devices include, these are examples of input devices. We have keyboard, we have mouse, we have scanner, we have digital cameras, microphones, etc. Then we also have output devices where we have monitor, printer, stereo speakers, headphones, and so on and so forth. Communication devices such as modems and network interface cards perform both input and output, allowing computers to share information. Yes, when you look at your computer, we have what you call the network interface card. This is a point where we attach our Ethernet cable to our computer. That point serves as both input and output, because it can let traffic into the computer and can also take traffic out of the computer to the network, hence to other computing devices on the network. Then we also have storage, like I talked about this previously. The purpose of storage is to hold the data permanently, so that even if power goes off the computer, even if computer is turned off, it should be still holding that information that is on the computer. That is the reason as to why you can keep your computer for 10 years without using it, keeping all other factors constant. You should be able to power on this computer 10 years later and get all your information intact. Because with the storage, it doesn't really need power for it to hold that information. Storage devices hold data not currently being used by the CPU. Yes, I remember explaining this in a slide earlier, where I said for the central processing unit or CPU, it operates at a very high speed, and for that same reason, it uses its information or its data, it picks its data from the RAM. Whatever the CPU needs to work on has to be fetched from your storage, put onto the RAM, then the CPU starts executing on it from the RAM, because the RAM in its operation is more faster compared to the storage, permanent storage. Data is commonly stored on a magnetic or optical disk. A disk drive is a device that needs data from, that reads data from and writes data onto the disk. Most new computers feature floppy disk. By the way, by the time these notes, by the time of compilation of these notes, it's been some few years back. That's why you're seeing floppy disk appearing at this point, but if you're looking at recent computers, there's no floppy disk drive on the most recent computers. That is kind of ancient. The memory cards and flash disks, compact disks actually came and chased away the floppy disks, but that doesn't mean that we can't study about them. And how does a floppy disk look like? By the time we get to our practical classes where we have to look at these parts physically, we shall be able to look at the floppy disks, the DVDs, the SSDs, the HDDs, and so on and so forth. The most common optical storage devices are CD-ROM and DVD-ROM. Then we have software. Software is a set of instructions that drives a computer to perform specific tasks. If you go through all these slides, you're going to realize there are many definitions talking about the same thing. Initially, I told you software is just a set of instructions that tells a computer what to do and how to do it. Basically the same thing I'm repeating here, but in a different version, whereby I'm saying it's a set of instructions that drives a computer to perform specific tasks. The instructions tells the machine's physical components what to do. Let's take an example or a clear understanding of this statement. For your computer to work, for you, let's say you have speakers installed on your computer, you have internal speakers on your laptop. For those speakers, for you to get sound out of those speakers, you need the sound drivers installed on your computer. If you don't have sound drivers on your computer, you are not going to be able to get any sound coming out of that computer, even when the speakers are fixed well and working properly. Drivers are just sets of instructions that are installed giving the functionality of the hardware components of the computer, of which without these drivers, back in the days, just a few years ago, what used to happen is we used to install the operating system separately, then we also install all the drivers separately. That is in the era of Windows XP. But with Windows 7, 8.1, 8, 10, and now 11, there has been some bit of improvement, whereby the operating system comes with most of the drivers that you need. You just have to install the operating system. It comes with most of the drivers, with about a few missing that now you can install. And nowadays you don't actually need to install those drivers that are missing. All you need to do is update your system, update your computer, and then all these missing drivers come automatically. The moment you install your operating system, get access to internet, update your operating system, then you find the drivers are coming automatic. Bottom line is, if you don't have the drivers for certain hardware components of your computer, the functionality will not be there. And drivers are just softwares. And what are softwares? Sets of instructions. When a computer is using a particular program, it is said to be running or executing the program. The two most common types of programs are system software and then application software. We're going to look at this in details in the next slide. What is system software? System software is any program that controls the computer hardware or that can be used to maintain the computer in some way so that it runs more efficiently. Some softwares provides a platform. System softwares provide a platform for running application software. This is how I want us to look at the system software. It acts as a bridge connecting the computer hardware to the computer users and then to the application software. This is a point where the three different components or the different entities meet. The hardware of a computer, the application softwares, for you to install them, they have to sit on the system software, and for you to use and interact with the hardware components of the computer, you still need the system software. Let's look at it in this way. You have your computer, you have your hard disk inside, which is 500 GB. For you to be able to partition it or break it into two, let's say local disk C and local disk D, whereby local disk C is for your operating system and then local disk D is for your data backup. For you to be able to achieve that, you need an operating system, which comes with the utility programs that you're going to use to achieve that. How do you get your pictures? How do you get your movies into your hard disk? You don't get the hard disk, then you start scooping with your hands and putting in the files. No. With the help of the operating system, with what we call graphic user interface based system, you're able to get your softwares, your resources or your information, and then put it into the computer. That's how you're able to put your movies. That's how you're able to put your songs, your videos, and your documents into your computer with the help of the system software. And we are going to realize there are three basic types of system software. We have what you call operating systems, that tells the computer how to use its own components. All the computers require an operating system. Yes, I explained earlier, if you've been following through, I said your computer, when you buy it brand new, that no one has ever used before, it only comes with what we call firmware. And firmware gives limited functionality or controls to the user, to the end user of the machine. Firmwares are put by the manufacturers of the computer, and it can be used to do very limited things with your computer, basically programming your computer. But for you to be able to interact with your computer and do all that you need to do with it, you need what we call an operating system on your computer. The operating system tells the computer how to interact with the user and its own devices. And examples of operating systems, we have Windows, we have Macintosh operating systems or Mac OS for Apple computers. Then we have Linux operating system. When you go into smartphones, because these are also types fall under computers, you're going to find we have Android operating systems. We also have iOS for people who are using iPhones. Initially, before the coming of the popularity of Android, we used to have small button phones that were running on Java operating system. But there are basically many operating systems out there. Actually, operating system is a course unit of its own. Just operating systems. But what we need to understand at this level, which is Computer Literacy 1, is operating system falls under a system software. Then we also have another software that falls under system software, which is network operating system. Just like the operating system, but this one now applies to computers that are on the network. Allow computers to communicate and share data across the network while controlling network operations and overseeing the network security. An example of this is Windows Server 2003. Then lastly, under system software, we have what you will call a utility program. A utility is a program that makes the computer system easier to use or perform highly specialized functions. Utility softwares are used to manage disks, troubleshoot hardware problems, and perform other tasks that a operating system itself may not be able to do. Now let's try to break this down. You're going to need a utility program in your as part of the system software which will help you to achieve certain functionalities on your computer that the operating system itself may not be able to do. One of which they have given us is troubleshooting. What is to troubleshoot? In computing, troubleshooting is trying to identify a problem within the computer and then solving it. If we are talking in medical terms, we would call this, or we would term this, running diagnosis. Like when you go to the hospital and you say you're sick because of this and that, the doctor tries to solve what you're suffering from, but they have to first diagnose you and then identify the problem and solve it. Now in computing, we call it troubleshooting. Examples of utility programs, we have antivirus. Then we have partition magic, which is used for creating partitions in the storage. Then the antivirus is basically for protecting your computer against computer virus. Then we have category 2, which is now application software. The application software tells the computer how to accomplish specific tasks such as word processing or drawing for the user. By the definition of application software, we're going to realize that it is specific in nature. It can be used to solve specific tasks or to accomplish specific tasks. Let's take an example. We have what you call VLC. VLC will be used for watching movies and playing songs. That is all you can do with VLC. You can't use VLC for typing. It is specific in nature. It only accomplishes that specific task. If you open Microsoft Word, you can't watch movies on Microsoft Word. You can use it for drafting your Word documents. Why? Because it is specific in nature. It's only used for word processing. You can't use it for watching movies. Some of the major categories of this application include word processing software for creating text-based documents like Microsoft Word. Then we have spreadsheet for creating numeric-based documents such as budgets. Now that is things like Excel and QuickBook. These are examples of spreadsheet programs. Then we have presentation programs for creating a presentation for creating and presenting electronic slides. Now this is PowerPoint. Then we have graphic programs for designing such as Adobe Illustrator, or manipulating such as Photoshop, Photoshop, and then for movies editing as well, such as Adobe Premiere Pro. Database management system software for building and manipulating large sets of data such as names, address, etc. These are all examples of application software. The key point we need to take away with us is that application softwares are specific in nature. Then we come to this slide here, which is talking about data and information. Data are words, numbers, symbols, and graphs that describe people, events, things, and ideas. Still, I will advise you to go for the other definitions I gave you earlier because they are more clear and easier to grasp than this one. Data becomes information when it is used as a basis for initiating some action or for making a decision. Very, very true. And that is what we call information, because I can tell you, let's take an example. I can tell you a word, a letter in the alphabet, which is A. There's no decision you can make out of the letter A. But if I went ahead and added other alphabets to it to tell you apple, you would know that I'm talking about a fruit. But still, you wouldn't make sense out of what I'm talking about when I just say apple. But if I went ahead to add other words to it by telling you, on your way back from town, bring for me some apples, here it will make some sense. It will allow you make a decision either to come with the apples from town or not. But if I just told you apple, you wouldn't make sense, or it wouldn't give you a chance to make a decision out of the word apple. So data becomes information only when it's useful and can be used as a basis for initiating some kind of action or decision making. Informations are the words, numbers, and graphics used as the basis for human action and decision. A set of data that has been given a name is called a file. A file that the user can open and use is called a document. A folder is a place where groups of computer files and other folders can be kept and organized. A file is a named collection of data stored on the storage media such as a hard disk. And there are basically two types of files. We have what we call the data files that contains text, images, and other data that can be used by a program. Then we also have what you call executable files that contains programs or instructions that tells the computer how to perform tasks. Executable files, all the computer programs that we install on our computer are actually executable files. But the files that we open on our computer, such as images, you open your Microsoft Word, then you start typing, you open your PDF, you start, these are all just data files. But the ones that we install are actually executable files. File name extension describes a file content. Yes, every file on your computer has a file extension, and this file extension describes the file content. An example is this: when you open Microsoft Word, you have documents that you have saved on your computer. When you open it, it will open with Microsoft Word automatically. How does it decide of all the programs on your computer to open with Microsoft Word? Remember, the Word document that you saved, if you saved it, let's say you typed your work as CV, you saved it as my CV. Automatically, if you typed it in Microsoft Word, it's going to get a file extension of .docs, .docx, or .doc, just like that. And that is what describes the file content, meaning that by the time you're opening it, it looks at the file extension and it knows which program to open with. If you saved it as PDF, it's going to be mycv.pdf, which means the next time you'll be opening it, it's going to open with a program that is responsible for opening PDF. That is the reason as to why you open your videos in your computer and they open with VLC. Why? Because they have .mp4 as its file extension describing the content of the file. So it is easy for a program to associate with it, to open with it, knowing its file extension. Then we have the executable files having .exe has their file extension, such that whenever you're installing, automatically you click on it, it has to initiate the installation process by itself, because it has a file extension for executable files. Then a file might be followed by a file name might be followed by file extension that further describe the file content. Yes, that is what I've just talked about right now. Like Word, you have .doc. Excel, we have .xls. If it is PowerPoint, we shall have .ppt. Then if it is PDF, you're going to have .pdf. If it is an image, you're either going to have .jpeg or .png and other image file extensions. The file format is the arrangement of the data in a file and the coding scheme that is used to present the data. The native file format is that is saved by application that created it. Yes, that it is in the format of the file that was used to create it. So basically, this is what we had to look at this session. Thank you very much. Let's meet in the next session.